Good morning. Today I'm pleased to be joined by an honored guest of our nation, Prime Minister Toни Blер of the United Kingdom. We're speaking to you from the map room in the White House.
But no issue has been more pressing in our discussions than the threat to world peace and stability posed by Saddam Hussein. I stand foursquare with you in our determination to bring Saddam into line with the agreement he made at the end of the Gulf War. Simply, he must be stopped. We are pursuing all the diplomatic avenues open to us. But if they fail, and force is the only way to get him into line, then force must be used. If that happens, Britain will be there, as we have been in the past, at the forefront in our determination to uphold international peace and security.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. On Iraq, as on so many issues, the United States and Britain speak with one voice. Since the end of the Gulf War, the United Nations inspectors in Iraq have done a remarkable job. They have found and destroyed 38,000 chemical weapons, more than 100,000 gallons of the agents used in those weapons, 48 missiles, 30 warheads specifically fitted for chemical and biological weapons, and a large plant for producing deadly biological agents on a massive scale. But their job is not yet done. The United States and Britain are determined to prevent Saddam Hussein from threatening the world with weapons of mass destruction again. Now, the best way to do that is to get the inspectors back on the job with full and free access to all the sites so they can root out whatever else needs to be destroyed and then continue to monitor suspect sites. It's up to Saddam to make that happen. If he doesn't, we must be, and we are, prepared to act. As we speak, the British aircraft carrier Invincible is patrolling the waters of the Persian Gulf with America's Fifth Fleet. United with our allies abroad, we're also united here at home. I thank the many Republicans and Democrats who've expressed strong support for our stand against this menace to global security.
Madam Speaker, I will make a statement on the recent crisis over weapons inspections in Iraq and the agreement signed by the UN Secretary General and the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq in Baghdad yesterday. Since the text of the agreement is now in the public domain, I'm arranging for copies to be placed in the library of the House. Madam Speaker, it is worth recalling again the origins of this crisis. One of the main conditions of the Gulf War ceasefire in 1991 was that Iraq's weapons of mass destruction should be destroyed or rendered harmless by inspectors working for the United Nations. This was embodied in Security Council Resolution 687. Since then, the UN weapons inspectors have done a tremendous job in finding and destroying these weapons. The full details have been given to the House before, but they include horrific amounts of chemical and biological weapons. The inspectors achieved this despite systematic obstruction, deceit, and concealment by Saddam Hussein, which caused repeated confrontation between the UN Security Council and Iraq. There was a crisis last November about the composition of the UNSCOM teams, which was resolved by Saddam Hussein agreeing to allow the inspectors back in following a diplomatic agreement brokered by the Russians. Crucially, however, this was not written down or followed by a fresh Security Council resolution. He almost immediately went back on this agreement, plunging us into the most recent crisis about access to presidential compounds, some of them large and containing hundreds of buildings and presidential palaces. This has not been an artificial agreement about some theoretical threat, but a reflection of real alarm on the part of the UN inspectors about the use of these sites to conceal both evidence and actual weapons. The Security Council cannot accept that any areas remain off limits. Saddam began by saying that there could be no access to these sites. Then, under intense pressure, not least from the start of the build-up of forces in the Gulf, he eventually agreed that they could be visited once. This was clearly unacceptable, but he refused to move further. Meanwhile, ourselves and the Americans, together with our other allies, continued to make clear that if he did not back down, we saw no alternative in the end to the use of force. we made preparations to ensure that we were ready to use force if absolutely necessary. Under this renewed pressure, Saddam Hussein began to show readiness to move further. Then, on the basis of a text drafted by Britain, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council agreed last week that the UN Secretary-General should go to Baghdad to make clear to Saddam Hussein that he had to comply fully and unconditionally with the relevant Security Council resolutions and to negotiate a written agreement on these lines. It was clear to all that if Saddam was not prepared to agree, force might have to be used, albeit with the greatest reluctance. I am delighted that Kofi Annan, for whom I have the greatest respect and admiration, has succeeded in this mission and has brought us back a signed agreement, the details of which have now become public. He will be reporting to the Security Council this afternoon on his discussions with the Iraqi government. The key provisions of this agreement are as follows. Iraq reconfirms its acceptance of the relevant Security Council resolutions, including 687, and its readiness to cooperate fully with UNSCOM and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Iraq undertakes to accord immediate, unconditional and unrestricted access to UNSCOM and the IAEA. A special group will then be established to inspect 8 clearly defined presidential sites composed of UNSCOM and IAEA experts, together with diplomats appointed by the Secretary-General and headed by a commissioner also appointed by the Secretary-General. This group will operate under the established procedures of UNSCOM and the IAEA, but also with some extra specific procedures related to the nature of the sites. We await clarification of the details of the special group, but 3 things are essential. 1, the commissioner in charge of this group must be properly qualified for the task. 2, the details of the inspection regime must preserve in full the professional and technical nature of the inspections and the inspectors. And 3, there can be no question of negotiating with Saddam Hussein over the integrity of the weapons inspections process. I am confident from our contacts with the Secretary-General that he understands all these points. Madam Speaker, I welcome this agreement and pay tribute to Secretary-General Kofi Annan's achievement in securing it. It has been an important demonstration of the value of the United Nations and its absolutely vital role in the world. And we should never forget that if we do not stop Saddam Hussein acting in breach of his agreement on weapons of mass destruction, the losers will be not just those threatened by him, but also the authority and standing of the UN itself. The agreement refers to the desire of the Iraqi government for the lifting of sanctions. No timetable is set for this. The sanctions have always been there for a reason, to ensure full compliance of Iraq with the relevant Security Council resolutions. Once this is achieved, the issue of lifting sanctions can be properly addressed. Let me also deal with one false assertion often made by the Iraqi regime. It has never been our intention to undermine Iraq's territorial integrity or its security or indeed the dignity of the Iraqi people. The issue has always been to ensure there are no weapons of mass destruction left in Saddam Hussein's arsenal. The agreement repeats this and makes it clear. However, Madam Speaker, while the agreement signed in Baghdad is welcome, it is not in itself enough. A piece of paper signed by the Iraqi regime plainly cannot be enough. The Saddam Hussein we face today is the same Saddam Hussein we faced yesterday. He has not changed. He remains an evil and brutal dictator. The only thing that has changed is that he has changed his mind in the face of effective diplomacy and firm willingness to use force. Nothing else would or could have brought about this success. Nothing else will ensure that it is followed up by satisfactory implementation on the ground and the total elimination of his capacity to obtain or produce weapons of mass destruction. We will not tolerate any repetition of the Iraqi behavior which has led to this agreement. We are not going to play more elaborate diplomatic games that allow Saddam Hussein to thwart the inspections regime which has now been agreed. And that is why, therefore, there are now 2 essential requirements in the coming days. First, we need to embody this agreement in a new Security Council resolution. This must make clear that any further prevarication or obstruction by Saddam Hussein of the smooth operation of the inspections in accordance with previous Security Council resolutions and this latest agreement, will not be accepted by any member of the Security Council and will inescapably be followed by the most severe consequences for the Iraqi regime. Second, the implementation of the agreement must be tested soon. This will require inspections by UNSCOM without any Iraqi obstruction, whenever and wherever they wish to inspect. There will be no immediate change in the readiness of British or US armed forces in the Gulf until this is clear. Madam Speaker, throughout the dispute, our aim has been a peaceful diplomatic settlement. There was no desire on either side of the Atlantic to use force, but it was also clear to us throughout that Saddam Hussein only understands and respects force. Those who have criticized ourselves and the Americans for our willingness to use force in the last resort have to explain how such an attitude could have recovered Kuwait in 1990 or could ensure Saddam's compliance now. I do not believe they can convincingly do so. As indeed Kofi Annan said in Baghdad, you can achieve much by diplomacy, but you can achieve a lot more when diplomacy is backed by firmness and force. I would put it this way, Madam Speaker. With Saddam, diplomacy plus force equals success. Our task now is to do everything we can to ensure that the agreement reached by Kofi Annan is smoothly, effectively, and rapidly implemented. We played a key diplomatic role in the negotiations leading up to this mission, and we will continue to play the same role in the follow-up. I've already discussed this with Presidents Clinton, Yeltsin, and Chirac in the last 24 hours. My right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, is in close touch with his counterparts. We are agreed on the need, all of us, for a rapid and clear Security Council resolution to ensure that we cannot find ourselves in the same position again in the future. That will be the main focus of our immediate efforts. I have made clear that when Saddam Hussein has complied fully with the Security Council resolutions, the UN inspectors have completed the disarmament stage of their work, and the threat from his weapons of mass destruction have gone, we can consider the lifting of sanctions. Indeed, if Saddam had not blocked the implementation of UNSCOM's work so systematically, this could have happened long ago. The long-suffering Iraqi people deserve our sympathy and our help, and our quarrel was never and is not with them. We led the way in New York last week in the adoption of a new Security Council resolution that more than doubles Iraq's ability to sell oil for food, even though, I may say, food and medicine have never been subject to sanctions of any kind. I hope this time Saddam will allow the scheme to be utilized properly for the benefit of all his people. Meanwhile, we will maintain and, if possible, increase the direct bilateral help we give to the Iraqi people through appropriate NGOs. Madam Speaker, Saddam Hussein has spent 7 years playing for time, but has been thwarted by the resolve of the international community. It is now clearer than ever that his games have to stop once and for all. If they do not, the consequences should be clear to all. Throughout, our objectives have been plain: to do everything in our power to destroy Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, to hold out the prospect of relief for the Iraqi people, and to uphold the will of the United Nations. That is what we have done, and it is what we will continue to do.